The invitations sat on my desk for 3 weeks before the grand opening, cream-colored cardstock with elegant copper lettering that read, "You're invited to celebrate the launch of Ember and Oak." I had hand-delivered each one personally, watching my family's faces as they promised they'd be there. My father held his invitation like it was made of glass, telling me how proud he was. My mother kissed my cheek and said she wouldn't miss it for the world. Derek, my older brother, clapped me on the shoulder and said it was about time I did something ambitious. Even Kelly, my younger sister, fresh out of college and full of opinions, told me she'd bring friends to fill the place. I believed every word. I had no reason not to. These were the people who raised me, who shared meals at our family table every Sunday, who supposedly wanted the best for me. So when opening night arrived and I stood in the empty dining room at 7:30, watching couples and food critics and local influencers fill every table except the one reserved for my family, I felt something crack inside my chest that I didn't know could break. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The dining room at Ember and Oak glowed with a warmth I had spent 2 years imagining. Exposed brick walls caught the flicker of votives on each table, and the custom wood-fired oven I'd designed with a craftsman from Hood River radiated heat that smelled of burning applewood and promise. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed downtown Portland like a postcard, the city lights competing with the amber glow inside. Everything was exactly as I'd envisioned during those long nights when I worked double shifts at the diner, saving every dollar, sketching floor plans on napkins during my breaks, teaching myself about profit margins and food costs and the thousand invisible things that separated dreamers from owners. I'd open the doors at 5 o'clock sharp, my hands trembling as I turned the key for the first time as the owner, not the employee. Jordan Blake, my best friend since culinary school, stood beside me in chef's whites, grinning so wide I thought his face might split. He'd believed in this from the beginning, back when it was just a wild idea I'd whispered over beers after particularly brutal shifts. He was the only one who knew the full story, the only person I'd trusted with the truth of how far I'd come and how much I'd sacrificed to get here. The first guests arrived at 5:15, a couple celebrating their anniversary who'd read about us in Portland Monthly's preview of new restaurants to watch. Then came a food blogger I recognized from Instagram, then a table of 4 who worked at the hospital nearby and had been intrigued by our menu. By 6 o'clock, we were at 70% capacity. By 6:30, we had a wait list. The kitchen hummed with the rhythm Jordan and I had practiced for months, every station moving in sync, every plate leaving the pass looking like art. The reviews were already happening in real time as I watched guests photograph their dishes, their faces lighting up with first bites. But table 12 remained empty. The chef's table I'd positioned near the open kitchen so my family could watch me work, so they could see what I'd built, remained set with untouched water glasses and folded napkins. I'd put my father at the head, my mother beside him, spaces for Derek and Nicole, for Kelly and whatever friends she'd promised to bring. 8 seats that mocked me every time I glanced over from the expo line. At 7 o'clock I texted my mother, "Running late, we saved your table." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then nothing. I texted Kelly, no response. I tried calling Derek but it went straight to voicemail. Jordan caught my eye from the grill station and gave me a look that said he'd noticed, that he was worried, but we were in the middle of service and there was no time to stop and feel whatever was building in my throat. By 7:30 I stopped checking my phone. By 8, I'd accepted they weren't coming. Jordan quietly asked our floor manager to release table 12 to the wait list, and I watched a delighted couple take the seats I'd reserved for the people who were supposed to matter most. They ordered the braised short rib and the seared scallops, and when their food arrived, they ate with the kind of enthusiasm that should have filled me with pride, but instead felt hollow. The evening continued in a blur of tickets and table touches and compliments I barely registered. A writer from Eater Portland asked for an interview. A local restaurant owner I'd admired for years stopped by the kitchen to congratulate me and asked if I'd consider collaborating on a pop-up. Everything I'd worked toward was happening exactly as I'd hoped, except for the one thing that mattered. The people who'd watched me grow up, who'd eaten my food at every family gathering, who'd claimed they wanted to support me, had chosen not to show. Service ended at 10, the last guests lingered over dessert, savoring our signature chocolate torte with smoked sea salt, and when they finally left, they pressed a business card into my hand and said they'd be back next week with their entire office. Jordan started breaking down his station while our small team cleaned and reset for tomorrow. I stood at the pass, looking out at the empty dining room that had been so full of strangers and so empty of family, and felt the weight of the evening finally settle on my shoulders. Jordan found me there 20 minutes later, after everyone else had gone home. He didn't say anything at first, just stood beside me in the quiet restaurant, both of us still in our whites, both of us exhausted. Finally he spoke. "You want to talk about it?" I shook my head. "What's there to say? They didn't come. Did they give you a reason?" "They didn't give me anything. No call, no text after I reached out, nothing." I laughed, but it came out bitter. "I hand-delivered those invitations, Jordan. I looked each of them in the eye and told them how much it would mean to have them here." My dad actually teared up. He said he couldn't wait to see his kid's dream come true. Jordan was quiet for a moment, then said, "Maybe something happened. An emergency or something." "All of them, at the same time?" I turned to look at him. "No, this was a choice. They chose not to be here." He didn't argue because he knew I was right. We'd been friends long enough that he understood my family dynamics, had heard enough stories to know that their absence wasn't an accident. It was a statement. I just didn't understand yet what they were trying to say. We locked up at 11, and I drove home to my small one-bedroom apartment in southeast Portland, the same place I'd lived for 3 years while I saved and planned and built toward this night. It wasn't much, barely 600 square feet with a kitchen the size of a closet, but it was mine and it was paid for, and every penny I'd earned beyond rent had gone into Ember and oak. Derek loved to joke about my living situation whenever he visited, loved to compare it to the 4-bedroom house he and Nicole had bought in Beaverton, as if square footage was the only measure of success. I fell asleep that night still in my chef's whites, too tired to shower, too hurt to process what had happened. My phone sat silent on the nightstand, no missed calls, no apologetic texts. Nothing to explain why the people who claimed to love me had abandoned the most important night of my life. Morning came too early. I had to be back at the restaurant by 9 to receive deliveries and prep for lunch service. Jordan arrived at the same time, both of us moving slower than usual, the exhaustion of opening night layered with something heavier. We worked in comfortable silence, breaking down vegetables, portioning proteins, preparing the sauces and stocks that would form the backbone of today's menu. It was meditative work.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
The kind that let my mind wander, and it kept wandering back to that empty table. Around 10:30, my phone buzzed. Finally, I thought, reaching for it with hands still dusty with flour. But it wasn't an apology, it was a text in the family group chat, the one we'd had for years, usually filled with Sunday dinner plans and birthday reminders and photos of Kelly's cat. Derek had sent a photo. It showed our entire family, all of them, gathered around a table at some restaurant I didn't recognize. My parents, Derek and Nicole, Kelly, even my Aunt Margaret who lived in Seattle. They were all dressed nicely, glasses of wine raised and a toast, smiling at the camera. The caption read, "Amazing dinner at Castagna. Nothing beats a classic. Some restaurants just have what it takes to succeed." I stared at the photo, reading the caption 3 times, trying to make it mean something other than what it obviously meant. They hadn't forgotten about my opening. They hadn't had an emergency. They'd chosen to go to dinner at a different restaurant, at the exact time they were supposed to be at mine, and then they'd posted about it in the family chat where they knew I'd see it. Jordan looked over my shoulder and let out a low whistle. Are you kidding me right now? I couldn't speak, couldn't move, just kept staring at their smiling faces, at the expensive restaurant they'd chosen over mine, at the message that was clearer than any words could be. They didn't believe in me, they didn't think Ember and Oak would succeed, they'd gone somewhere established, somewhere safe, somewhere that didn't require them to bet on their own family member. My phone buzzed again. Kelly had replied to Derek's photo with a string of emojis and best meal ever. My mother had hearted the message. Nobody mentioned my restaurant, nobody acknowledged that they'd missed my opening, nobody seemed to care. Alex, Jordan said carefully, watching my face, "What do you want to do?" I set my phone down on the stainless steel counter, screen side down so I didn't have to see it. "I want to prep for lunch service. We have reservations starting at 11:30. That's not what I meant. I know what you meant." I turned back to the vegetables I'd been chopping, picking up my knife with hands that shook slightly. "But right now, we have a restaurant to run. Whatever this is, whatever they're trying to prove, it doesn't change what we built here." Jordan nodded slowly, respecting the boundary I'd drawn, but I could feel his concern radiating across the kitchen. He knew me well enough to recognize when I was holding something back, when I was using work to avoid feeling things I didn't want to feel. But he also knew me well enough to let me process in my own time. Lunch service was steady, not as overwhelming as opening night, but solid enough to feel encouraging. We served 37 covers between 11:30 and 2:30, including a table of food writers who'd heard about us through the industry grapevine. They ordered extensively, asked intelligent questions about our sourcing and techniques, and left promising they'd be writing about us soon. It was exactly the kind of validation I'd worked toward, the kind that should have thrilled me. Instead, I kept thinking about that photo. About my family's smiling faces at someone else's restaurant, about the careful cruelty of posting it where I'd see it, of making sure I knew their absence had been deliberate. After lunch service ended, and the kitchen was clean, I finally let myself look at my phone again. The family group chat had continued without me. They'd posted more photos from their dinner, discussed the wine pairings, complimented the service. Normal family conversation, except it was happening around the void of my absence, around the restaurant opening they'd collectively decided to skip. I scrolled up, looking at earlier messages, trying to find the moment when this had been decided. Had they planned it? Had Derek suggested it in a separate chat, rallied everyone to make a statement by not showing up, or had it been more organic, a collective understanding that they didn't need to support something they didn't believe would last? 3 days before my opening, my mother had texted asking what the dress code was. 2 days before, Kelly had asked if she could bring 3 friends. The day before, my father had sent a photo of the tie he planned to wear, asking if it was too formal. They'd all been engaged, all been planning to come, right up until they'd decided not to. Jordan emerged from the walk-in cooler, carrying a case of microgreens, his timing impeccable as always. He set it down, and looked at me. "You ready to talk yet?" "There's nothing to talk about." They made their position clear. "Which is what exactly?" "That they don't support you, that they don't believe Ember and Oak will succeed, that I'm wasting my time and their presence would just be humoring a fantasy." I gestured around the kitchen, at the commercial equipment I'd carefully selected, at the systems we'd built, at everything that represented 2 years of planning and sacrifice. "They think this is going to fail, and they don't want to be associated with it when it does. That's insane. We're booked solid for the next 2 weeks. We had food writers here today. Portland Monthly is featuring us next month. They don't know any of that. They still think I'm a line cook barely making rent, and they can't imagine how someone like me could possibly open a successful restaurant." I heard the bitterness in my voice, and couldn't stop it. Derek's been telling anyone who'll listen about my poor life choices for years. Why would he show up to support something he's already decided is doomed? Jordan leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "So what are you going to do about it?" "Nothing. I'm going to run this restaurant, make it successful, and prove them wrong without needing their validation." That's very mature and healthy, but I know you, Alex. You're hurt, you're angry, and you have every right to be. He was right, of course. Beneath the professional composure I was maintaining, Beneath the focus on prep and service and all the tangible tasks that filled my days, I was absolutely devastated. These were the people who'd raised me, who I'd cooked for at every holiday, who I'd imagined standing beside me during the biggest moment of my career, and they'd chosen to actively undermine that moment, to show me exactly how little they believed in what I'd built. My phone buzzed again. Another family chat message, this time from my father. Hope everyone has a great rest of their weekend. No mention of me, no acknowledgement of what they'd missed, just casual family pleasantries that excluded me entirely. I pocketed my phone and turned to Jordan. Dinner prep starts in an hour, let's get the braise going. He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded and moved to pull the short ribs from the cooler. We fell into the familiar rhythm of kitchen work, the motions I'd repeated thousands of times, the muscle memory that let my hands work while my mind spun in circles I couldn't quite escape. The weekend passed in a blur of service and silence. Saturday night brought our biggest crowd yet, every table filled, the energy in the dining room electric with the kind of buzz that restaurants dream about. Food journalists sat beside first-time diners who'd heard about us through word of mouth. A couple celebrating their engagement asked if they could book their rehearsal dinner with us 6 months out. Our signature dish, the wood-fired salmon with charred lemon and herb oil, sold out by 8:30. Jordan had to pivot to the halibut special, which ended up impressing a table of chefs from a Michelin-starred restaurant in Seattle, who were in town for a food festival. Everything was working. Every system we'd designed, every recipe we'd tested, every detail I'd obsessed over was coming together exactly as planned. By any objective measure, Ember and Oak's opening weekend was a triumph, but I couldn't shake the hollow feeling that settled in my chest every time I glanced toward the dining room and remembered who wasn't there. Sunday brought a slightly slower lunch service, which gave me time to actually breathe and take stock. Jordan and I sat in the small office behind the kitchen, reviewing numbers on my laptop. Reservations were already booked 3 weeks out. Our food cost was exactly where I'd projected it. Labor was slightly high but within acceptable range for an opening week. The financial reality matched the creative success, both pointing toward something sustainable, something real. Jordan leaned back in his chair, hands behind his head. You know what this means, right? We actually pulled it off. This isn't just opening week buzz. These numbers suggest we've got something that'll last. I nodded, staring at the spreadsheet but not really seeing it. Yeah, we did. You could sound more excited about it. I am excited, I'm just tired. He gave me that look, the one that said he knew I was deflecting. Have you heard from any of them? No, and I don't expect to. I closed the laptop. They made their statement. I got the message. Which was what? Exactly, because I still don't understand what they were thinking. I'd been asking myself the same question for 3 days. I think they were trying to teach me a lesson, show me that I was being unrealistic, that I needed to stay in my lane. Derek's always been the successful one, the one with the real career and the impressive salary. Kelly just graduated with a degree in marketing and already has a job at a tech startup. Even my parents, they worked hard their whole lives, but they played it safe. Steady jobs, predictable income, nothing risky, and you opened a restaurant, which is basically the definition of risky. Exactly. I think they see this as reckless, as me trying to be something I'm not, and by not showing up, by going to an established restaurant instead, they were showing me what real success looks like. They were putting me in my place. Jordan was quiet for a moment. That's really messed up, you know that? Even if they had concerns, even if they thought this was risky, you don't skip your kid's restaurant opening, you don't ghost your sibling on the biggest night of their life. You do if you think you're doing them a favor, if you think you're giving them a reality check they need. I stood stretching my back, which ached from 3 straight days of being on my feet. But it doesn't matter, the restaurant speaks for itself. Either we succeed or we don't, and their opinion doesn't change the outcome. My phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced at it expecting another benign family chat message, but this time it was a text from my mother, sent directly to me. We need to talk. Can you come to Sunday dinner tonight? I showed the message to Jordan. He raised his eyebrows. Are you going to go? I don't know. Part of me wants to ignore it, let them sit with what they did, but another part of me wants to hear what possible explanation they could have. What time is dinner service tonight? We're fully booked from 5 to 9:30, so you literally can't make Sunday dinner even if you wanted to." Jordan grinned slightly. Convenient. He was right. Sunday dinner at my parents' house always started at 6, right in the middle of our peak service hours. Even if I wanted to go, even if I was willing to have that conversation, I couldn't abandon my restaurant on a Sunday night. I typed back a simple response: "Can't tonight, restaurant." My mother's reply came 30 seconds later: "This is exactly what we need to discuss. Tomorrow then, lunch at the house." I stared at the message, anger rising in my chest, the presumption that I could just drop everything, that my schedule was flexible in a way that suited their needs, felt like another dismissal of what I'd built. But I was also curious, morbidly so, about what they wanted to say, what explanation they thought would justify their absence. "I'll go tomorrow," I told Jordan. "Monday's our day off anyway, might as well get this over with." He nodded. "Want me to come with you?" Moral support. "No, this is family business," as dysfunctional as that family might be, but I appreciate the offer. Sunday night service was just as strong as Saturday. We had a party of 8 celebrating a birthday, who ordered almost everything on the menu, passing plates family style, and laughing loud enough to energize the whole dining room. A local Instagram influencer posted a photo of our chocolate torte that immediately got thousands of likes. 2 different tables asked if we did private events, which would be a significant revenue stream if we could make it work. I moved through service on autopilot, my hands doing the work while my mind rehearsed conversations I'd have with my family, what I'd say, how I'd respond, whether I'd stay calm or let them see how much they'd hurt me. By the time we closed at 10, I still hadn't decided on a strategy. Part of me wanted to walk in there with all my success metrics printed out, shove the numbers in Derek's face, and demand he acknowledge what I'd accomplished. Another part wanted to stay quiet, let them talk, give them enough rope to hang themselves with their own words. Jordan found me doing unnecessary prep work at 11, breaking down vegetables we didn't need until Wednesday. "Go home, Alex, get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be hard enough without you being exhausted." He was right, though I hated admitting it. I cleaned my station, changed out of my chef's whites, and drove home through empty Portland streets. The city looked different at night, softer somehow, the streetlights casting everything in amber tones that made even the industrial areas seem gentle. I thought about all the times I'd driven these streets over the past 2 years, coming home from prep work or supply runs, always focused on the goal of opening night, always imagining my family's faces when they walked into the restaurant I'd built. I'd imagined it wrong. That was the thing that kept circling through my mind, as I parked outside my apartment building, and climbed the stairs to my unit. I'd built an entire fantasy around their support, their pride, their presence, and reality had revealed that fantasy for what it was, just wishful thinking disconnected from who they actually were. Sleep came in fragments that night, my dreams filled with empty tables and unanswered phones, and my father's face when I'd handed him that invitation, the way he'd smiled, and promised he'd be there. I woke Monday morning feeling more tired than when I'd gone to bed, but also oddly calm. Whatever happened at my parents' house today, at least I'd know where things stood. At least the uncertainty would be over. I dressed carefully, not in chef's whites, but in dark jeans and a nice sweater, something that split the difference between casual and professional. I wanted to look put together, successful, like someone who had their life figured out. I drove to Beaverton around 11, giving myself plenty of time before the lunch my mother had commanded I attend. My parents' house looked exactly as it always had, a modest ranch-style home they'd bought 30 years ago when they'd first gotten married. The lawn was neatly maintained, the flower beds my mother tended every spring already showing early tulips. Derek's Tesla was parked in the driveway, which meant he'd already arrived. Kelly's Honda was there too. They'd all made time to come, all adjusted their schedules for this family meeting. I wondered if they'd done the same calculations I had, whether they'd debated what to wear, and what to say. I sat in my car for a full minute before getting out, gathering whatever courage or resolve, or simple curiosity would get me through the next hour. Then I walked up the path I'd walked 1,000 times, past the garden gnome my father thought was hilarious, and my mother tolerated, and knocked on the door of my childhood home. My mother answered immediately, as if she'd been waiting by the door. She looked older than I remembered, though it had only been 3 weeks since I'd last seen her, or maybe I was just seeing her differently now, through the lens of her absence. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Alex, come in." The house smelled like roast chicken and rosemary, the same smell that had greeted me after school for years. The living room looked unchanged. Same furniture, same family photos on the mantel, including one of me at my culinary school graduation that Derek had missed because of a work conference. Everyone was already gathered, Derek and Nicole on the couch, Kelly in the armchair, my father standing by the window as if he'd been watching for my arrival. No one moved to hug me, no one said congratulations or asked how opening weekend went. They just looked at me with expressions I couldn't quite read. Something between concern and determination, like parents about to deliver difficult news to a child who wouldn't want to hear it. "Sit down, honey," my mother said, gesturing to the remaining armchair. I remained standing. "I'd rather not. Whatever this is, just say it." Derek exchanged a glance with my father, some silent communication passing between them. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, using the same posture I'd seen him use in business meetings. "We didn't come to your opening because we think you're making a massive mistake, and we didn't want to encourage it by showing up." The bluntness was almost refreshing. At least he wasn't pretending this was anything other than what it was. "Go on. Restaurants fail, Alex. The statistics are brutal. 60% close within the first year, 80% within 5 years. You sank your entire savings into something that's more likely to bankrupt you than succeed. We've all been talking about it for months, and we decided the kindest thing we could do was not enable this fantasy." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Months. You've been planning this for months." My mother stepped forward, her hands clasped together. "We're worried about you, sweetheart. You've always been a dreamer, but there's a difference between dreams and reality. We didn't want to watch you destroy your financial future for something that was never going to work." "Never going to work," I repeated, tasting the words. "Based on what?" "Based on everything," Kelly said, speaking up for the first time. She looked uncomfortable but committed to whatever intervention this was supposed to be. "You're 29 years old, with no business experience, no reputation in the industry, trying to open a restaurant in one of the most competitive food cities in the country. It's not realistic. We went to Castagna that night to show you what a real restaurant looks like," Derek continued. "A place that's been successful for years, that has systems and reputation and staying power. We thought if we made it clear that we weren't going to support this recklessness, you might reconsider before it's too late." I stood in my parents' living room, surrounded by people who shared my blood, but apparently understood nothing about who I was or what I'd built. The words they were saying felt distant, like I was hearing them through water. They'd planned this for months. While I was signing leases and hiring staff and perfecting recipes, they'd been conspiring to undermine me, convincing themselves that cruelty was actually kindness. "Before it's too late for what?" I asked, my voice calmer than I felt. "What exactly do you think is going to happen?" My father finally spoke, his voice heavy with what he probably thought was wisdom. "You're going to lose everything, Alex. Your savings, your credit, maybe even your apartment when you can't make rent. We've seen it happen to other people, young folks who think passion is enough. It's not. Business requires capital and experience and connections you just don't have. We want you to close it now," my mother
added quickly. "Before you're in too deep. Before the debt becomes insurmountable. Cut your losses. Go back to the diner where you had steady income. There's no shame in admitting something didn't work out." Nicole, who'd been silent until now, leaned forward with what looked like genuine concern on her face. "We looked into it, Alex. The average cost of opening a restaurant in Portland is between $200,000 and $500,000. Even if you're on the low end, that's crushing debt for someone with your income level. The interest alone could follow you for decades." I looked at each of them in turn. These people who thought they knew my situation, who'd made assumptions and decisions based on incomplete information. Derek sat there in his expensive button-down, probably custom-made, looking at me like I was a child who needed protection from my own poor judgment. Kelly fidgeted with her phone, young and certain in the way only someone who'd never truly risked anything could be. My parents stood together, united in their misguided attempt to save me from myself. Are you finished? I asked. We know you're upset, Derek said, but someday you'll understand we did this because we love you. Tough love is still love. Tough love. I tasted the phrase, found it sour. Is that what you call abandoning someone on the most important night of their life? Is that what you call posting photos of yourself at a different restaurant, making sure I knew your absence was deliberate? That's not tough love, Derek. That's just cruelty with a justification. It was necessary, he insisted. You weren't listening to reason. We had to make a statement dramatic enough that you'd actually pay attention. Oh, I paid attention. I noticed every empty seat at the table I'd reserved for you. I noticed every hour that passed without a phone call or a text. I noticed you all having a lovely family dinner while I worked the most stressful night of my career. Trust me, your statement was received loud and clear. My mother reached toward me, her eyes brimming with tears. Please don't be angry, we're trying to help you. If you close the restaurant now, you can recover. But if you wait until it fails, until you've exhausted every resource, the damage will be so much worse. When it fails, I corrected. You said when, not if. You're already certain of the outcome. The statistics don't lie, Derek said. 80% failure rate within 5 years. Those aren't odds any rational person would bet on. I walked to the window, looking out at the street where I'd learned to ride a bike, where I'd waited for the school bus, where I'd lived a version of my life that felt very far away now. Behind me, my family waited for my response, probably expecting tears or anger or some breakdown that would prove I wasn't ready for the adult world of business and failure. Instead, I felt something settling inside me, a clarity I hadn't possessed even an hour ago. Their intervention had accidentally given me a gift. It had shown me exactly who they were and what they believed about me. There was no more uncertainty, no more wondering if I'd misunderstood their absence. They'd spelled it out explicitly. They thought I was going to fail, and they'd decided not to be there when it happened. I need to tell you something, I said, turning back to face them. And I need you to listen without interrupting, because this is important. My father nodded. Of course. That's why we're here, to talk this through. Ember and Oak had 312 covers this weekend. That's customers, not plates. We served 312 individual people across our opening weekend, with an average check of $68 per person. Our food cost is running at 29%, which is excellent for a new restaurant. Our labor cost is slightly high at 35%, but that's expected during opening when we're overstaffed to ensure quality. We're booked solid for the next 3 weeks, and we already have inquiries about private events that could add significant revenue. Kelly frowned. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the restaurant you all decided would fail. I'm giving you actual data instead of assumptions. I pulled out my phone, opening the spreadsheet Jordan and I had reviewed the day before. Our break-even point is $42,000 per month. Based on our current reservation rate and average check, we'll clear that by week 3. By month 2, we should be profitable. Not breaking even, actually profitable. Derek stood up, his business instincts apparently triggered by numbers. That's impossible. You're 29 years old. How could you possibly have the capital to open a restaurant that's already profitable? Because I didn't just decide to do this last month. I've been planning for 2 years. I worked 80-hour weeks at the diner, saved every penny beyond basic living expenses. I went to culinary school at night, paid in cash so I wouldn't have student loans. I apprenticed with 3 different chefs on my days off, learning everything I could about kitchen management and menu development. I found investors who believed in my concept, people in the industry who saw potential you never bothered to look for. My mother's hand went to her mouth. Investors? You have investors? 3 of them. A retired restaurant owner who liked my business plan, a local food distributor who gave me favorable terms in exchange for equity, and a chef I worked with who wanted to support new talent. Together they covered 40% of startup costs. I covered the other 60% with my savings and a small business loan, with terms I can easily manage. The room had gone very quiet. Even Derek looked uncertain now, his confident dismissal wavering in the face of actual information. Nicole was staring at her phone, probably trying to verify what I was saying. Kelly just looked confused, as if the numbers didn't align with the version of me she'd constructed in her head. The total cost was $230,000, I continued. Lower than average because I did a lot of the renovation work myself and bought used equipment from restaurants that had closed. I didn't need top-of-the-line everything, I needed functional equipment and a solid concept. Jordan Blake, my sous chef and business partner, has a 10% stake in exchange for sweat equity and his culinary expertise. Between all of us, we built something sustainable. My father sat down heavily in his chair. 2 years. You've been planning this for 2 years and never said anything? I told you I was taking some business classes. I told you I was working on a project. You never asked for details because you'd already decided it wasn't worth your attention. I was just Alex, the line cook who'd never amount to much, who needed to stay in my lane and be grateful for steady paychecks. That's not fair, my mother protested. We never said that. You didn't have to say it. You showed it every time Derek talked about his salary, and you asked follow-up questions for 20 minutes. Every time Kelly mentioned her new job, and you bragged to your friends. Every time I tried to talk about my plans, and you changed the subject, or told me to be realistic. You showed me exactly what you thought of my potential. Derek was shaking his head, still trying to process. Even if the numbers work now, sustainability is different. You can't predict how long the buzz will last. Opening week is always strong, then reality sets in. You're right, which is why I have a 12-month operating reserve. Enough to cover expenses even if revenue drops 30%, which it won't based on industry patterns for restaurants with strong openings. I also have relationships with food writers and critics who are already planning features. Portland Monthly is doing a profile next month. Eater Portland wants an interview. We're building the kind of press that creates sustained interest, not just opening week curiosity. Kelly finally found her voice. Why didn't you tell us any of this? If you had all this figured out, why let us think you were struggling? Because I wanted to see if you'd support me without needing proof first. I wanted to know if you believed in me as a person, not just in my bank account or my business plan. And you showed me the answer. You don't believe in me. You believe in statistics and safe choices and staying in your lane. When I stepped outside those boundaries, you decided I needed to be taught a lesson. The silence that followed was different from before. Heavier with implications they were only beginning to understand. I could see my mother's mind working, realizing what they'd done, what they'd missed. My father looked stricken, the pride he'd shown when I handed him that invitation now tainted by his absence. Even Derek seemed less certain, though his jaw was still set in that stubborn way that meant he wasn't ready to admit he'd been wrong. We were trying to protect you, my mother said weakly. No, you were trying to control me. There's a difference. Protection would have been asking questions, offering advice, being present even if you had concerns. What you did was abandon me, because I didn't follow the script you'd written for my life. You decided my dreams were threats that needed to be shut down, and you used the cruelest method available. You made me feel alone, on a night when I should have felt celebrated. Nicole stood up suddenly, her face flushed. This isn't fair. We had legitimate concerns based on real statistics. Restaurant failure rates are facts, not opinions. You can't blame us for being worried. I'm not blaming you for being worried. I'm blaming you for letting worry justify cruelty. You could have expressed concerns and still shown up. You could have said you were scared for me and still been there. Instead, you chose to punish me for taking a risk you weren't brave enough to take yourselves. That landed hard. Derek's face reddened and Kelly looked away. My father stared at his hands, and my mother's tears finally spilled over. I felt no satisfaction in their discomfort, only a weary acknowledgement that some truths needed to be spoken even when they hurt. I need you to understand something, I said, my voice softer now, but no less firm. Ember and Oak is going to succeed. Not because I'm lucky, or because I ignored reality, but because I planned carefully and worked harder than you can imagine. And when it does succeed, when it's still thriving a year from now, 5 years from now, I need you to remember this moment. Remember that you chose to bet against me. Remember that when I needed support, you gave me sabotage. Alex, please, my mother started, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. I came here today because you asked me to, because some part of me still wanted to believe you had a good explanation. But what I found was worse than I imagined. You didn't skip my opening because of an emergency or a misunderstanding. You skipped it because you wanted to hurt me enough that I'd give up. You wanted me to fail before I even started, and that tells me everything I need to know about where we stand. Derek stood up, his business persona cracking slightly. So what? You're cutting us off. You're going to pretend we don't exist because we made one mistake. You call it one mistake. I call it a deliberate choice to humiliate me on the most important night of my life. And no, I'm not cutting you off. I'm just adjusting my expectations. I'm accepting that you're not the people I thought you were, and I'm moving forward accordingly. That's dramatic, Kelly said, but her voice lacked conviction. Is it? You all sat around, discussing my impending failure for months. You coordinated your absence to make a statement. You posted photos of yourselves at another restaurant to make sure I felt the knife twist. That's not dramatic, that's just factual. My father finally stood, moving toward me with hands outstretched. Son, we made a mistake. A big one, but we're still your family. Doesn't that count for something? I looked at him. This man, who'd worked 2 jobs to give us a better life, who'd taught me about hard work and perseverance, who'd apparently forgotten those lessons when it came to believing in his own child. It counts for something. It counts for me standing here explaining this instead of just walking away, but it doesn't count for automatic forgiveness, and it doesn't erase what you did. What do you want from us? My mother asked, her voice breaking. An apology. We're sorry, we're so sorry we hurt you. Please don't let this destroy our family. I looked at my mother's tear-streaked face and felt something complicated twist in my chest. Part of me wanted to accept the apology and move on, to pretend the wound wasn't as deep as it felt. But another part, the part that had stood in an empty restaurant, wondering why the people who raised me couldn't spare a single evening to celebrate with me, knew that sorry wasn't enough. Words were easy. Changed behavior was what mattered. I don't want an apology that comes because you're uncomfortable with the consequences of your actions. I want you to actually understand what you did, and why it was wrong. And right now, I don't think you do. You're sorry I'm upset, but you're not sorry you tried to sabotage me. You still think you were right, you just wish the outcome had been different. Derek crossed his arms. That's not true. We can see we made a mistake. Can you? Because 5 minutes ago, you were still defending it as tough love. You were still talking about failure statistics and how you needed to make a dramatic statement. That's not remorse, Derek. That's just regret that your plan didn't work. Nicole stood beside her husband, her expression shifting from defensive to something more thoughtful. What would you want us to do differently? If we could go back, what should we have done? It was the first genuine question anyone had asked, and I appreciated it even as I struggled to answer. You should have asked me about my plans instead of assuming I didn't have any. You should have expressed your concerns directly instead of orchestrating some elaborate lesson. You should have trusted that I'm an adult capable of making informed decisions about my own life. And most importantly, you should have shown up. Even if you thought I was making a mistake, you should have been there. But you weren't making a mistake. Kelly said quietly. That's what we're finding out now. You actually knew what you were doing. Would it have mattered if I was making a mistake? Should your support be conditional on me being right? Because that's not how family works, or at least, that's not how I thought it worked. Family shows up. Family supports you even when they're scared for you. Family doesn't abandon you to teach you a lesson. My father sat back down, and for the first time since I'd arrived, he looked truly broken. Not just uncomfortable or defensive, but genuinely devastated by what he was hearing. I stood at your graduation and promised I'd always be there for you. When you got your first line cook job, I told you I was proud of you for chasing your passion. And then when it really mattered, when you needed me most, I let your brother convince me that staying away was the right thing to do. Derek's head snapped toward him. Don't put this all on me. You agreed with every word I said. I know I did. And I was wrong. My father looked at me with eyes that suddenly seemed older. I let fear make my decisions. Fear that you'd fail, fear that you'd be hurt, fear that I'd have to watch you struggle. And I convinced myself that preventing the struggle was more important than being present for it. That was wrong. And I'm sorry. The apology felt different from my mother's, more specific, more aware of what had actually been taken from me. But it still didn't erase the empty table, or the hours I'd spent, wondering if I was fundamentally unlovable. It didn't undo the damage of believing my family saw me as someone destined to fail. I appreciate that. I said carefully. I do. But I need you to understand that this changed things between us. I can't go back to Sunday dinners and family holidays and pretend everything is fine. I can't trust you the way I did before, because now I know that your support is conditional. I know that if I make choices you don't approve of, you'll withdraw rather than engage. That's not fair. Derek protested. One mistake doesn't define our entire relationship. It wasn't one mistake. It was months of planning. It was deliberate coordination. It was posting photos to hurt me. It was choosing another restaurant, specifically to make a point. Those aren't mistakes, Derek. Those are choices, consistent choices that revealed something about how you see me. Kelly spoke up, her voice uncertain. What if we came to the restaurant now? Would that help? We could make a reservation, bring friends, show our support publicly. I shook my head. I don't want performative support. I don't want you showing up now, because you found out I might actually succeed. That's not belief, that's just hedging your bets. If you come to Ember and Oak, I want it to be because you genuinely want to celebrate what I've built, not because you're trying to get back in my good graces. Then what do you want? My mother asked desperately. Tell us what we can do to fix this. I want time. I want space to process what happened and figure out what our relationship looks like going forward. I want you to sit with the discomfort of what you did instead of rushing to make it better. And I want you to think about why you didn't believe in me, what that says about how you see me, and whether that's something you can actually change. The room fell silent again. Outside, I could hear a neighbor mowing their lawn, the mundane sound of suburban life, continuing regardless of the fractures happening inside this house. I thought about all the Sunday dinners I'd attended here, all the holidays and birthdays and casual weeknight meals. Those memories felt distant now, belonging to a version of my family that maybe had never really existed. I need to go, I said, checking my phone. I have a meeting with a produce supplier at 2. On your day off? My mother asked automatically, then seemed to realize how that sounded. I mean, of course you do. You're running a business. I'm running a successful business. I corrected gently. And that requires working even on days off, especially in the beginning. But I don't resent it. I chose this life, and I'm good at it, and I'm proud of what I've built. I just wish you could have been proud of it too. Before you knew the numbers worked out. I walked toward the door, and nobody tried to stop me. My hand was on the knob when my father spoke again. Alex. Wait. Just one more thing. I turned back. He was standing now, hands in his pockets, looking more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. That night, when you gave me the invitation, I cried because I was so proud of you. Not because of what you'd accomplished, but because you'd had the courage to try. And then I let fear turn that pride into doubt, and I threw away the chance to be there for the moment you'd worked so hard to create. I need you to know that I regret that more than anything I've ever done. Not because you turned out to be successful, but because I failed you when you needed me to believe. Something in my chest cracked slightly, not breaking but shifting. His words weren't enough to fix everything, but they were real in a way the earlier apologies hadn't been. They acknowledged what had actually been lost, not just the discomfort of the present moment. Thank you for saying that. I managed. It matters. Will you tell me about the restaurant sometime? Not today, but when you're ready. I want to hear about the menu, the design, the vision you had. I want to understand what I missed. Maybe, I said. When I'm ready. I left before anyone could say anything else, walking out into the bright afternoon sunshine that felt almost aggressive after the dim interior of my parents' house. My car sat in the driveway beside Derek's Tesla, a visual representation of everything they'd assumed about my life. Small, modest, practical. They'd never bothered to look beneath the surface to see what I was building. The drive back to Portland felt longer than usual, traffic thick on Highway 26, as I merged with the flow of people returning to the city. I called Jordan hands-free, needing to hear a friendly voice, needing to talk to someone who'd never doubted what we were building. How'd it go? He asked as soon as he picked up. About as expected. They think they were protecting me. They're sorry I'm upset, but not really sorry they did it. Except maybe my dad, who seemed to actually get it by the end. Did you tell them about the numbers? Every detail. Revenue. Costs. Projections. All of it. Derek nearly fell over when he realized I actually knew what I was doing. Jordan laughed. I would have paid to see his face. What happens now? Now I take some space, and figure out if those relationships can be repaired, or if they're just broken permanently. And I focus on the restaurant, which is the only thing that's gone right lately. The restaurant's going better than right. We got an email this morning from a corporate client wanting to book a private event for 60 people, and Eater Portland confirmed they want to do the feature next week. Despite everything, I felt a smile pulling at my face. 60 people. That's our biggest booking yet. I know. We'll need to do a special menu, probably pre-fixed to make the kitchen flow work. But Alex, this is exactly what we hoped for. We're building something real. Yeah, we are. I merged onto I-405, the Portland skyline coming into view ahead of me. Listen, I'm going to skip the supplier meeting. Can you handle it? I just need some time to process. Of course. Take the afternoon. Hell, take the whole day. You've earned it. I hung up and found myself driving not toward my apartment, but toward the restaurant. I parked on the street outside, looking up at the sign Jordan and I had agonized over for weeks before choosing the right font and style. Ember and oak and copper letters that caught the afternoon light. Through the windows, I could see the empty dining room, tables set and ready for tomorrow's service, everything in its place. I let myself in through the front door, disarming the alarm, and standing in the quiet space. Without guests and music, and the energy of service, the restaurant felt different, more intimate somehow. I walked through the dining room, running my hand along the back of each chair, remembering the countless decisions that had gone into every detail. The table placement for optimal flow, the lighting designed to create warmth without darkness, the acoustic panels hidden in the ceiling to manage sound. The kitchen was spotless from yesterday's closing, every surface gleaming, every tool in its proper place. I stood at the pass, where I'd stood 3 nights ago, watching strangers fill the seats my family had abandoned, and I felt something settling inside me. Yes, their absence had hurt. Yes, I'd have to figure out how to process that hurt, and whether forgiveness was possible. But standing here in the space I'd built, in the dream I'd manifested through planning and work, and relentless determination, I realized something important. Their belief wasn't necessary for my success. It would have been nice. It would have made the victory sweeter, but their doubt hadn't stopped me, and their absence hadn't broken me. I'd built Ember and Oak not because my family believed I could, but because I believed it myself. And that belief, that core certainty about my own capabilities, was something they'd never given me, and could never take away. My phone buzzed with a text from Jordan. Supplier meeting went great. Locked in spring vegetables at fantastic prices. Also, just got a call from Willamette Week wanting to add us to their best new restaurants list. It's happening, Alex. I typed back quickly. It's happening because we made it happen. See you tomorrow morning for prep. I stayed in the restaurant for another hour, sitting at the bar and reviewing reservations for the coming week, making notes about menu adjustments, thinking about the corporate event, and what kind of experience would turn them into repeat clients. This was my world now, this space I'd created, these problems I'd chosen to solve. My family could be part of it or not, their presence was no longer required for my happiness or success. When I finally left, locking the door behind me, and setting the alarm, the sun was starting its descent toward the West Hills. The evening light turned everything golden, the same color as the flames in our wood-fired oven, the same warmth I'd tried to create in every aspect of Ember and Oak. I thought about opening night, about the strangers who'd filled those seats and celebrated with me, even though they didn't know my story. About the food writers, and the engaged couple and the chefs from Seattle, who'd recognized something worth their attention. My family had tried to teach me a lesson about knowing my place, about staying safe, and avoiding risk, but the lesson I'd actually learned was different. I'd learned that belief has to come from within, that external validation is nice, but not essential, that the people who truly matter are the ones who show up even when the outcome is uncertain. Jordan had shown up. The investors who'd believed in my concept had shown up. The customers who'd taken a chance on a brand new restaurant had shown up. My family hadn't, but their absence had revealed something valuable. It had shown me that I was strong enough to succeed without them, that my dream wasn't dependent on their approval, that I could build something beautiful even when the people who were supposed to love me chose to look away. 3 weeks later, Ember and Oak was still thriving. We'd settled into a rhythm, the initial chaos of opening giving way to smoother operations and more confident execution. Our reservations were booked out 6 weeks now, and we'd started a wait list for cancellations. The Eater Portland feature had driven significant traffic, and the Willamette Week recognition had cemented our reputation as one of the city's most exciting new restaurants. Jordan and I were prepping for dinner service on a Thursday evening when my phone rang. My mother's name appeared on the screen. I'd been expecting this call, or one like it, ever since I'd walked out of their house 3 weeks ago. I stepped into the office and answered. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, sweetheart. Is this a good time?" "I have about 10 minutes before service starts." "What's up?" She was quiet for a moment. "Your father and I would like to come to the restaurant. Not for any big reconciliation or dramatic gesture. Just to have dinner, to see what you've built. Kelly wants to come too. Would that be okay?" I leaned against the desk, processing the request. Part of me wanted to say no, to make them wait longer, to punish them the way they'd punished me. But another part, the part that remembered my father's genuine remorse and my mother's tears, knew that this was what healing looked like.
Imperfect and comfortable, requiring vulnerability from everyone involved. Okay, I said. But I need you to understand something first. If you come as guests, not as family doing me a favor. You make a reservation like everyone else, you pay for your meal, and you don't expect special treatment or private conversations during service. If you want to see what I've built, you see it the way everyone else does. Of course, that's exactly what we want. And Derek, is he coming? Another pause. He says he's not ready. He's still processing everything, still struggling with being wrong about something he was so certain of. But I think he'll come around eventually.
Maybe he will. Maybe he won't. Either way, that's his choice to make. I checked my watch. I need to get back to the kitchen. Make a reservation through our website, any night except Friday or Saturday since those are fully booked. And Mom, I'm glad you called. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. They came the following Tuesday, my parents and Kelly, making a reservation for 6:30 under my mother's name. I didn't tell Jordan until an hour before they arrived, not wanting to make a big deal of it, not wanting to disrupt the flow of service with emotional complications. You okay with this? He asked, checking the roast chickens in the oven. I have to be. They're going to be part of my life one way or another. Might as well start figuring out what that looks like. I watched from the kitchen as they were seated, my mother looking around the dining room with wide eyes, my father taking in every detail of the design. Kelly was on her phone immediately, probably photographing everything for Instagram. They looked nervous, out of place in a way regular guests never did, as if they were waiting for permission to be there. Our server, Maria, was one of our best, warm and knowledgeable without being overbearing. I'd briefed her that these were family members, but asked her to treat them normally, no special accommodations. She brought them menus and water, explained our concept and sourcing, answered their questions about the wood-fired oven. I stayed in the kitchen, focused on tickets and timing, treating their table like any other. They ordered carefully, my parents choosing the roast chicken and the pork chop, Kelly opting for the salmon. I cooked their food myself, not because they were family, but because I cooked most of our proteins anyway, and I made sure each plate was perfect. The chicken with crispy skin and herb butter, the pork chop with apple, mostarda and roasted vegetables, the salmon with charred lemon and fennel. These were the dishes I'd perfected over months of testing, the food I was proud to serve to anyone who walked through our door. Maria brought the plates out, and I watched through the pass as my parents took their first bites. My mother's hand went to her mouth, her eyes closing. My father set down his fork and just stared at his plate. Kelly was photographing everything, but even she paused to actually taste the food, her expression shifting from casual interest to genuine surprise. They ate slowly, savoring each bite, occasionally looking toward the kitchen but never catching my eye. I kept working, plating other tables' orders, calling out tickets to the line, maintaining the focus that kept service running smoothly. This was my element. This was where I belonged, and watching them recognize, that felt like a validation I hadn't known I needed. When they finished their entrees, Maria offered dessert menus. They ordered our chocolate torte to share, along with coffee for my parents and tea for Kelly. I plated the dessert myself, adding an extra flourish of edible flowers and gold leaf. Not because they were family, but because I wanted them to see the full range of what we could do. They paid their bill without asking for any discount or special treatment, left a generous tip, and walked out without trying to come back to the kitchen. It was only after they'd gone, after I'd watched them pause outside the windows and talk animatedly about what they'd experienced, that I realized I was smiling. Jordan nudged me. That looked like it went well. Yeah, it did. My phone buzzed 10 minutes later. A text from my mother. That was incredible. I had no idea. We're so proud of you, sweetheart. Thank you for letting us come. I typed back a simple response. Thank you for coming. Kelly texted next, a string of photos from the meal followed by I'm posting all of this. My followers need to know about this place. Also, I'm sorry I didn't believe in you. You're kind of a genius. Even my father sent a message, just a few words but they meant everything. You were right. This is real. I should have trusted you. I pocketed my phone and turned back to the kitchen, where tickets were still printing and food still needed cooking. Their visit had been a step towards something, maybe not full reconciliation, but at least acknowledgement. They'd seen what I'd built, tasted the food I'd perfected, experienced the world I'd created, and maybe eventually, that would be enough for us to rebuild some version of family that honored both my independence and our connection. The weeks turned into months, and Ember and Oak continued to thrive. We expanded our hours, added a weekend brunch service that became instantly popular, started hosting monthly wine dinners that sold out within hours of announcement. The restaurant became exactly what I'd envisioned, a place where food and hospitality created experiences people wanted to repeat, where quality and consistency built loyalty that transcended the initial buzz. My parents came back monthly, always making reservations, always paying full price, gradually relaxing into being guests rather than observers. Kelly brought friends and colleagues, her social media posts driving a steady stream of new customers. Even Derek eventually came, 6 months after opening, bringing Nicole and admitting stiffly that he'd been wrong to doubt me. I accepted his apology, served him an excellent meal, and let the past stay in the past where it belonged. The first anniversary of our opening arrived on a clear spring evening, the city alive with the energy of longer days and warming weather. Jordan and I had planned a special menu, highlighting the dishes that had become signatures and introducing new plates we'd developed over the year. We'd invited some of the regular customers who'd supported us from the beginning, the food writers who'd helped spread the word, the suppliers and staff who'd made everything possible, and I'd invited my family, all of them, for a private celebration after regular service ended. They came, even Derek, who still looked uncomfortable but was making an effort. We gathered around the chef's table, the one that had sat empty on opening night, and I served them a tasting menu that told the story of our first year. My father raised a glass when the meal concluded, his voice thick with emotion. "A year ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life by not being here when you needed me. I can't change that, but I can be here now, and I can tell you that what you've built is extraordinary. Not just the food or the success, but the integrity and vision and sheer determination it took to make this happen. I'm proud of you, Alex, not because you proved us wrong, but because you stayed true to yourself, even when we didn't believe." I felt tears pricking at my eyes, but kept my voice steady. Thank you, all of you, for being here tonight, for taking the journey to get here. This place exists because I refused to let other people's doubts become my limitations, but it thrives because of the people who believed even when it wasn't easy, who showed up even when the outcome was uncertain. Family isn't just about blood, it's about who stands beside you when it matters. Jordan raised his glass, to Ember and Oak, to second chances, and to the courage to build something beautiful even when nobody else can see it yet. We drank together, the people who'd hurt me and the people who'd supported me, all gathered in the space I'd created through vision and work and unwavering belief in my own capabilities. The restaurant hummed around us, the equipment cooling down, the last traces of service settling into quiet. Outside, Portland continued its endless rhythm, but in here, in this moment, everything felt exactly as it should be. The lesson my family had tried to teach me was about knowing my place, about accepting limitations, about staying safe. But the lesson I'd actually learned was about trust, not in others' belief, but in my own judgment, not in their validation, but in my own vision. They'd tried to show me what failure looked like by abandoning me when I needed them. Instead, they'd shown me what success really meant, the ability to thrive, regardless of who believes in you, to build beauty even when surrounded by doubt, to stand firm in your truth, even when everyone around you insists you're wrong. Ember and Oak would continue, through seasons and years, through challenges and triumphs, and I would continue with it. The chef and owner who'd learned that the most important person who needs to believe in your dreams is yourself. Everything else, the support and recognition and celebration, that comes after. But the belief, the core certainty that you're capable of extraordinary things, that has to come from within. And once you have that, nobody can take it away, not even the people who are supposed to love you most. The months following our first anniversary brought changes I hadn't anticipated.
Ember and Oak had become more than just a successful restaurant, it had become a fixture in Portland's culinary landscape, the kind of place people mentioned when talking about the city's food scene. We'd been featured in national publications, earned recognition from the James Beard Foundation as a semi-finalist for Best New Restaurant, and built a team that felt more like family than employees. But success brought its own complications. With recognition came pressure to expand, to open a second location, to franchise the concept. Investors I'd never met reached out with proposals. Real estate agents sent me listings for potential sites. Even Jordan started talking about what a second restaurant could look like, how we could replicate what we'd built without diluting the quality that made Ember and Oak special. I sat in my small office on a quiet Monday afternoon, the restaurant closed for our weekly day of rest, reviewing a particularly compelling offer from a restaurant group that wanted to partner on expansion. The numbers were impressive, the terms generous, the potential for growth exactly what most chefs dreamed of achieving, but something about it felt wrong, like I'd be chasing someone else's definition of success, rather than my own. My phone rang, and I was almost relieved to have an excuse to stop staring at spreadsheets. It was my father, calling during his lunch break from the hardware store where he'd worked for 30 years. We'd settled into a comfortable rhythm over the past year, regular phone calls that were easier than in-person visits, conversations that focused on the present rather than relitigating the past. "Hey Dad," I answered, leaning back in my chair. "What's going on?" "I have something to tell you, and I wanted you to hear it from me first." His voice carried a weight I couldn't immediately identify. "I'm retiring, end of the month. Your mother and I are going to do some traveling, maybe spend some time figuring out what the next chapter looks like." I sat up straighter. "That's wonderful. You've earned it. Where are you thinking of going?" "We haven't decided yet. Europe maybe. Your mother's always wanted to see Paris, but that's not really why I'm calling." He paused, and I heard him take a breath. Working at the hardware store for 3 decades, doing the same thing every day, it was safe, it was predictable. I knew exactly what each day would look like, what my paycheck would be, what my future held, and for a long time, I thought that was enough. I thought security was the same thing as success. "Dad, you don't have to explain anything." "No, I do, because I pushed that belief onto you, and it almost cost us our relationship. I was so convinced that the safe path was the only path that I couldn't see what you were building. I couldn't recognize that real success sometimes means taking risks I was too afraid to take myself." I felt my throat tighten. "You did what you thought was right. You provided for your family, gave us a stable childhood. That matters. It does matter. But so does believing in your children, when they're brave enough to chase dreams you couldn't. I'm retiring now at 62, wondering what I might have built if I'd had half your courage, and I'm so damn proud of you, Alex. Not just for Ember and Oak's success, but for having the strength to pursue it even when I tried to stop you." We talked for another 20 minutes, about his retirement plans and the restaurant, and the complicated work of rebuilding trust. When we hung up, I sat staring at the expansion proposal with new eyes. My father had spent his life choosing security over passion, and he'd built a good life, but now he was wondering about the road not taken. I didn't want to look back in 30 years and have the same regrets, but about different choices. I called Jordan, who answered on the second ring. "What's up? Thought we were both taking the day off." "We are. I just need to talk through something. This expansion offer, all these opportunities people keep bringing us, what do you actually want to do with them?" He was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, I want to keep doing what we're doing, get better at it, refine our systems, maybe add some new menu items. But I'm not sure I want to manage multiple locations, or deal with investors who don't understand what makes this place special." "Yeah, me neither." I felt relief wash over me. "I think we've been assuming that growth means expansion, but maybe growth means deepening what we've already built, getting better, rather than getting bigger." So we turn down the offers, we turn down the ones that don't align with what we want, and we stay focused on making Ember and Oak the best version of itself it can be. That decision, once made,
felt right in a way the expansion plans never had. Over the following weeks, I politely declined the partnership offers and the second location proposals. Instead, Jordan and I focused on evolution rather than expansion. We renovated the kitchen to improve workflow, added a small outdoor patio for summer dining, developed relationships with more local farms to ensure the highest quality ingredients. The restaurant continued to thrive, but on our terms, at our pace. We weren't trying to build an empire, we were trying to create something excellent and sustainable. The distinction mattered more than I'd realized. Summer arrived with its long, bright evenings and abundant produce. Our menu shifted to reflect the season, showcasing Oregon strawberries and fresh peas and the first tomatoes from our partner farms. The outdoor patio became a favorite spot for early dinner reservations, guests lingering over wine as the sun set behind the West Hills. It was during one of these perfect summer evenings that Derek walked into the restaurant unannounced, without a reservation, looking uncertain in a way I'd never seen him. Jordan was managing the floor that night, while I worked the line, and he caught my attention with a subtle gesture toward the host's stand where Derek stood waiting. I wiped my hands and stepped out of the kitchen. "Hey, do you have a reservation?" "No, I should have called, but I wasn't sure you'd agree to see me." He shifted his weight, hands in his pockets. "Do you have a few minutes? Maybe we could talk outside." I glanced back at the kitchen. We were in the middle of service, tickets printing steadily, but Jordan gave me a nod that said he could handle it. 5 minutes. Out front, we walked out to the sidewalk, evening light painting the buildings gold, the street busy with people enjoying the warm weather. Derek leaned against the brick wall, looking more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him, his usual confidence stripped away. "I've been thinking about what happened," he started. "Not just missing your opening, but why I pushed everyone to stay away. And I realized something uncomfortable about myself." I waited, letting him work through whatever he'd come to say. "I was jealous. You were doing something brave, something risky, something I'd never had the guts to do. I have a good job, a nice salary, a stable life, but it's all safe, all predictable. I've never built anything of my own, never risked anything significant, and watching you step out and chase something uncertain, it made me confront my own fear of failure." "So you tried to make me fail instead?" "Yeah, I told myself I was being practical, that I was protecting you from inevitable disappointment, but really, I think I wanted to prove that taking risks doesn't work, that the safe path I'd chosen was the right one, because if you succeeded where I'd never even tried, what did that say about me?" I leaned against the wall beside him. "It says you made different choices. There's nothing wrong with wanting stability, maybe not, but there's something wrong with tearing down someone else's dreams, because they highlight your own regrets." He turned to look at me. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I deserve to be in your life after what I did. But I needed you to know that I understand now. What I did wasn't about you or your restaurant, it was about my own inadequacy." The admission hung between us. A year ago, I might have found satisfaction in hearing him acknowledge his mistakes. Now I just felt tired of carrying the weight of other people's issues, tired of letting their fears and regrets shape my emotional landscape. "I appreciate you telling me this," I said finally. "It helps to understand where it came from. But Derek, I can't fix whatever's missing in your life. I can't make you feel better about your choices by forgiving you for trying to sabotage mine. That work is yours to do." "I know. I'm not asking you to fix anything. I just wanted you to know that I see it now, what I did and why, and I'm sorry." We stood in silence for a moment, the sounds of the city filling the space between us. Finally, I pushed off the wall. "I need to get back to service. But Derek, if you want to be part of my life going forward, it has to be real, not just showing up when it's convenient, or when you feel guilty. Real relationship requires consistent effort, and I'm not sure you're capable of that. I want to try. If you'll let me, then try. But don't expect me to make it easy, and don't expect immediate trust. You burned that, and earning it back takes time." I left him standing on the sidewalk and returned to the kitchen, slipping back into the rhythm of service like putting on familiar clothes. Whatever happened with Derek, whatever he did or didn't do to repair our relationship, it couldn't touch what I'd built here, this space, this success, this life I'd created.
it existed independent of his approval or his presence. The evening continued smoothly, each plate leaving the kitchen exactly as it should, each table experiencing the care and attention that had become our hallmark. Around 9, Jordan caught my attention and gestured toward the dining room. I looked through the pass and saw Derek sitting at the bar, nursing a glass of wine, watching the restaurant operate. He stayed until we closed, never asking to speak to me, never demanding attention, just observing, taking in the space I'd created, the team I'd built, the success he'd tried to prevent. When the last guests left and we started breaking down for the night, he approached the kitchen door. "Can I help clean up?" he asked. "I know it's strange, but I'd like to understand this world you've built, and maybe the best way to do that is to see how it works from the inside." I considered refusing, but something about the request felt genuine. "Fine, you can start by taking out the trash. Jordan will show you where it goes." For the next hour, Derek worked alongside our team, hauling trash, wiping down stations, sweeping floors. He didn't complain about the physical labor or act like it was beneath him. He just did the work, slowly and imperfectly, but with an earnestness that was new. When everything was clean, and the team had gone home, the three of us sat at the bar with beers, Derek looking exhausted but satisfied. I had no idea how much work this was. Not just the cooking, but everything else. The organization, the timing, the constant attention to detail. "It's a lot," I acknowledged, "but it's worth it when you love what you're doing." He nodded slowly. "I used to think loving your work was a luxury, that the smart thing was to choose a career for security and find fulfillment elsewhere. But sitting here now, seeing what you've created, I realize I might have gotten it backwards. Maybe the real luxury is spending your life doing something that matters to you." Jordan stood stretching. "On that philosophical note, I'm heading out. Alex, you good to lock up?" "Yeah, go ahead. See you tomorrow." After Jordan left, Derek and I sat in the quiet restaurant, the only sound the hum of refrigeration units and distant traffic. He swirled the last of his beer, then spoke quietly. "I want you to know something. When you succeed, when Ember and Oak keeps thriving and growing and becoming everything you envisioned, it won't be despite me trying to stop you. It'll be because you were strong enough that my doubts couldn't touch you. That's not something I could have taught you, even if I'd tried. That strength was always yours." "I know," I said simply, because I did know, had learned it the hard way through nights of doubt and moments of fear, and the persistent work of believing in myself when nobody else would. We finished our beers, and I walked him to the door, setting the alarm as we stepped outside. The night air was cool, summer's warmth fading with the late hour. Derek's car was parked down the block, and he paused before heading toward it. "Can I come back? Not as a customer, but like this. Maybe help close sometimes, learn about this world. I'm not trying to insert myself where I don't belong, but I'd like to understand what drives you, what makes this worth all the sacrifice." I thought about it, about whether having him around would help or hurt, whether his presence would feel like healing, or just reopening wounds. Finally I nodded. "You can come back, but Derek, I need you to understand something. I'm not doing this to prove anything to you or anyone else anymore. I'm doing it because I love it, because it challenges me, because building something excellent matters to me. Your opinion, whether positive or negative, doesn't change that. I get it, and honestly, that's what I want to learn. How to do something because it matters to me, not because it proves something to someone else." He left, and I stood outside Ember and Oak for a few minutes, looking at the restaurant I'd built against all the odds and doubts people had thrown at me. The sign glowed softly in the darkness, copper letters catching the streetlight. Inside, everything was clean and ready for tomorrow, systems in place, ingredients prepped, the constant cycle of creation and service that defined this life I'd chosen. My phone buzzed. A text from Kelly. "Just saw Derek's Instagram. He posted about working at your restaurant tonight, about learning what real passion looks like. I think he's finally getting it." I smiled, pocketing my phone. Maybe Derek was getting it, or maybe he wasn't, but either way, it didn't define my success. That was the final lesson I'd needed to learn. Success wasn't about proving doubters wrong or earning validation from people who'd failed to believe. Success was about building something you believed in so completely that other people's opinions became irrelevant. The seasons cycled on, and Ember and Oak continued to evolve. We added a chef's counter, where guests could watch the kitchen work while enjoying a tasting menu. We started hosting cooking classes on Monday afternoons, sharing techniques with home cooks who wanted to understand the craft. We partnered with culinary schools to offer internships, giving young cooks the kind of mentorship I'd had to seek out on my own. Derek did come back, regularly, helping with closing duties and slowly learning the rhythms of restaurant work. He never tried to give advice or assert authority, just absorbed what he could, and occasionally asked thoughtful questions. Over time, his presence became normal, another part of the restaurant's ecosystem. My parents visited monthly, sometimes bringing friends, always genuine in their appreciation. My mother had taken up food photography and documented each visit with careful attention to lighting and composition. My father had started a blog about Portland restaurants, featuring Ember and Oak prominently, but also exploring the broader culinary landscape. They were finding their own relationship to food and hospitality, ways to connect with what I'd built without trying to claim ownership of it. Kelly had become one of our most effective marketing assets, her social media presence driving steady traffic to the restaurant. But more than that, she'd developed a genuine interest in the business side of hospitality, often staying after her meals to ask about operations and finance. She was considering leaving her tech job to pursue something in the restaurant industry, and I'd agreed to mentor her if she decided to make the leap. 2 years after opening, on a crisp fall evening, I stood in the kitchen during a rare quiet moment between services. Jordan was reviewing next week's menu, and our sous chef was prepping vegetables for dinner. The kitchen hummed with familiar energy, everything in its right place, every person knowing their role. My phone rang, an unknown number, which I normally wouldn't answer during work hours, but something made me pick up. "This is Alex. Alex Morgan, this is Caroline Stokes, from the James Beard Foundation. I'm calling with some exciting news. Ember and Oak has been selected as a finalist for Best Chef Northwest. Congratulations." I gripped the phone tighter, the words not quite processing. James Beard finalist, the highest recognition in American cuisine, the kind of achievement that validated everything we'd built, not just to others, but to ourselves. "Thank you," I managed. "This is incredible." She explained the timeline, the awards ceremony in Chicago, the media opportunities. When I hung up, Jordan was staring at me. "What was that?" "We're James Beard finalists." The kitchen erupted in celebration, our small team gathering around, everyone talking at once. This was bigger than good reviews, or full reservations, or financial success. This was the culinary establishment, recognizing that what we'd built mattered, that our approach to food and hospitality had achieved something worth celebrating. I called my father first. He answered with his usual greeting, and I said simply, "Dad, we're James Beard finalists." The silence on the other end lasted so long, I thought we'd been disconnected. Then I heard him crying, soft sounds he tried to muffle. "Oh Alex, oh my God, I'm so proud of you, so incredibly proud." "I know Dad, I know you are." I called the rest of my family, each conversation bringing its own emotion. Kelly screamed so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Derek's voice cracked when he said congratulations, and I could hear the weight of everything unspoken, all the doubts he'd harbored, all the wrong assumptions he'd made. My mother cried happy tears, and immediately started planning what she'd wear to the awards ceremony. That evening, after service, I gathered the team for a proper celebration. We opened champagne and toasted not just the nomination but everything it represented. The early mornings and late nights, the constant refinement of skills, the dedication to excellence that defined every shift. This recognition belonged to all of us, everyone who'd believed in what we were building when it was just an idea sketched on napkins. Jordan pulled me aside as the celebration continued around us. "You know what this means, right? This validates everything. Everyone who doubted you, everyone who said it wouldn't work, this proves them wrong." I shook my head. "It doesn't prove anything except that we did good work. Whether I win or not, whether we get the recognition or not, what we've built here stands on its own merit." That's
what I've learned. Success isn't about external validation, it's about knowing you gave everything to something worth doing. He smiled. "That's very zen of you." But also, it feels pretty damn good to be recognized, doesn't it? Yeah, I admitted, grinning. It really does. The awards ceremony was 3 months away, but the nomination itself brought immediate changes. Press requests flooded in, reservation demand spiked even higher, and opportunities emerged that we'd never imagined. A publisher reached out about a cookbook. Television producers wanted to develop a show. Other cities invited us to do pop-ups and collaborations. Through it all, I tried to stay grounded in what actually mattered: the daily work of running an excellent restaurant, the relationships with team members and regular guests, the constant pursuit of improvement. The recognition was meaningful, but it wasn't the point. The point was the food we served every night, the experiences we created, the small moments of perfection that happened when everything came together exactly right. My family came to the awards ceremony in Chicago. All of them, even Derek, who took time off from work he probably couldn't spare. We sat together in the ballroom of the Lyric Opera House, surrounded by the best chefs in America, and I felt their pride radiating beside me. When they announced the winner, and it wasn't me, I felt disappointment but not devastation. Being in that room, being recognized among my peers, that was achievement enough. After the ceremony, we gathered for dinner at a restaurant one of the other nominees had recommended. My father raised his glass, his voice steady and clear. Whether you won tonight or not, you've already achieved something more important. You believed in yourself when we didn't. You built something beautiful when we told you it was impossible. You proved that courage and vision matter more than other people's limitations. I'm sorry it took me so long to see that, but I see it now. And I'm so grateful you never stopped believing, even when we did. I raised my glass to meet his. I learned something from all of this. I learned that the people who matter will either believe in you from the beginning, or they'll learn to believe through your actions. But either way, your success can't depend on their belief. It has to come from something deeper, something they can't touch or take away. Derek spoke up, his voice rough with emotion. You taught me that too. I spent my whole life choosing safety, and I convinced myself that made me smart. But watching you take risks and build something extraordinary, I realized safety isn't the same as success. Real achievement requires courage I never had. Until maybe now. What do you mean? I asked. He glanced at Nicole, who nodded encouragingly. I'm leaving my job, starting my own consulting firm. It's terrifying, and I'll probably fail a dozen times before I figure it out. But I realized I don't want to look back in 30 years and wonder what I could have built if I'd been brave enough to try. You showed me that possibility, even when I tried to destroy yours. The table fell quiet, the weight of his admission settling over us. Then Kelly raised her glass. To new beginnings. To courage over comfort. To building things that matter. We drank together, my family and I, in a city far from home but closer to understanding than we'd ever been. The path here had been difficult, marked by betrayal and hurt, and the slow work of rebuilding trust. But sitting there, seeing how my choices had rippled out to affect theirs, how my courage had given them permission to be brave, I understood that everything had unfolded exactly as it needed to. We flew back to Portland the next day, and I returned to Ember and Oak with renewed clarity. The restaurant was exactly what I'd intended it to be, a place of excellence and warmth, somewhere people came to celebrate and connect, where food was craft and service was art. The James Beard nomination had validated that, but the validation I really needed had come earlier. The night I'd stood in an empty restaurant and realized their absence couldn't diminish my achievement. Years passed, and Ember and Oak became a Portland institution. We earned our Michelin star, we topped best restaurant lists, we became the place visiting chefs wanted to eat when they came to town. But more than accolades, we built something sustainable and meaningful, A restaurant that treated staff well and guests better, that contributed to our community and elevated local agriculture, that proved success could be measured in more than revenue. My relationship with my family healed, slowly and imperfectly, but genuinely. Derek's consulting firm did fail, twice, before he found a model that worked, but he kept trying, kept risking, kept building. My parents traveled extensively, discovering cuisines and cultures they'd never experienced, becoming more adventurous in their own way. Kelly eventually did leave tech, opening a small wine bar that became Ember and Oak's favorite after-work spot. We all found our versions of courage, our ways of stepping beyond the safe and familiar into something more authentic. And while my journey had been the catalyst, each of them had to do their own work, face their own fears, choose their own risks. On the 5th anniversary of Ember and Oak's opening, we hosted a celebration that brought together everyone who'd been part of the journey, staff past and present, loyal guests who'd been with us from the beginning, suppliers and partners who'd supported our vision, and my family, all of them, gathered around tables, telling stories and sharing memories. I stood at the pass, watching the dining room full of people who'd become part of this story, and felt a completeness I'd never experienced before. This was what success looked like. Not perfection or universal acclaim, but the building of something meaningful that touched people's lives and created space for connection and joy. Jordan came to stand beside me, both of us in our whites, both of us exactly where we belonged. "You know what's crazy?" he said. 5 years ago they didn't show up, and that became the defining moment that made everything else possible. He was right, their absence had hurt, had wounded me in ways I'd needed time to heal, but it had also freed me from needing their approval, from measuring my worth by their belief. It had taught me that real strength comes from within, that true success is self-defined, that the people who matter will either believe from the start, or learn to believe through your actions. My father caught my eye from across the room and raised his glass. I raised mine in return, acknowledging everything we'd lost and found, everything that had broken and been rebuilt. The journey from that empty table to this full room had taught us all something valuable about courage and faith, and the complicated work of being family. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Derek approached me at the bar where I was helping close out tabs. "Can I ask you something? Do you ever think about what would have happened if we'd shown up that night, if we'd supported you from the beginning?" I considered the question. Sometimes, but honestly, I think things unfolded exactly as they needed to. Your absence forced me to find strength I didn't know I had. It taught me that my success couldn't depend on external validation, and ultimately, it brought us to a more honest relationship than we might have had otherwise. "So you're saying our betrayal was actually a gift?" His tone was wry but genuine. "I'm saying that sometimes the worst things people do to us end up teaching the most important lessons. You tried to break me, and instead you helped me discover I was unbreakable. That's not a gift you meant to give, but it's one I'm grateful for anyway." He nodded slowly, processing. "For what it's worth, I'm grateful too. Watching you succeed despite us, maybe because of us, it changed how I see everything. It made me braver." Good. The world needs more people willing to take risks, to build things, to believe in possibilities others can't see. As I locked the doors that night, the restaurant quiet behind me, I thought about the full circle of it all. From the devastating absence of opening night to this celebration of survival and success, from broken trust to rebuilt relationships, from doubt to unshakable certainty. The journey had been harder than I'd imagined, more painful than I'd wanted, but also richer and more transformative than I'd known was possible. Ember and Oak stood solid and real, a testament to what happens when you refuse to let other people's limitations become your own. My family had tried to teach me to stay small, to play it safe, to accept that dreams were dangerous. Instead, they'd accidentally taught me the opposite, that dreams pursued with courage and conviction could withstand any doubt, any absence, any attempt to diminish them. I walked to my car, under Portland's starlit sky, the city quiet in the late hour, and felt nothing but gratitude. For the pain that had strengthened me, for the doubters who'd forced me to believe harder, for the family that had learned to see me clearly, even after trying to make me invisible. The restaurant would open again tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, each service a small act of defiance against everyone who'd said it wouldn't last. But more than defiance, each service was an affirmation, a daily choice to build something excellent, to create experiences worth having, to prove that belief in yourself is the only validation that truly matters. My family hadn't shown up when I needed them, but I'd shown up for myself. And in the end, that had made all the difference. The months following our first anniversary brought changes I hadn't anticipated. Ember and oak had become woven into Portland's culinary landscape, no longer the exciting newcomer, but the established presence people trusted. We'd navigated a pandemic, weathered economic uncertainty, and emerged stronger than ever. Jordan and I had opened a small bakery 2 blocks away, not aggressive expansion, but organic growth that aligned with our vision. My family relationships had settled into something comfortable, with healthy boundaries protecting my space and energy. Sunday dinners happened monthly now, and I felt no guilt missing them when work demanded attention. It was a regular Tuesday evening when Margaret Chen approached me with an opportunity that would change everything again. She represented a culinary foundation, offering a 6-month residency working in partner restaurants across Europe and Asia, Paris, Copenhagen, Tokyo, Bangkok, Barcelona. Learning from masters, building relationships, expanding perspectives. "I can't leave for 6 months," I protested. "I have a restaurant to run." Jordan disagreed immediately. "This is the kind of opportunity you don't turn down. We've built strong systems, the restaurant will survive, and you'll come back better." I called my father, needing his perspective. We walked along the Willamette River as I explained my hesitation, my fear of leaving what I'd built. "When you opened Ember and Oak, you were afraid then too," he said. "But you did it anyway. This isn't leaving something behind, it's investing in it. The restaurant won't disappear, if anything, it will prove how solid your foundation is." He paused, then continued. "Fear disguised as protection is still just fear. When I stayed away from your opening, I thought I was keeping you safe. But I was imposing my own limitations on you. Don't do the same to yourself." His words settled the decision. I accepted the residency. The preparation over the next 3 months was intense. We hired a talented sous chef from Seattle to support Jordan. We adjusted the menu to highlight his strengths, created communication systems, and prepared the team for transition. My family threw a going-away dinner, and this time, their words carried weight I could trust. Derek spoke first, his voice steady. "When you opened this restaurant, I tried to stop you because I was afraid of what your success would mean about my choices. Now you're taking another leap, and I'm just grateful to witness it. You've taught us that growth requires courage," Kelly added, tears in her eyes. "You showed me that passion matters more than practicality. My wine bar exists because you proved it was possible to chase a dream and catch it." My mother's voice wavered. "I spent too many years trying to keep you small, but you were never meant to be small. Come back to us changed, come back to us better." My father finished, his hand covering mine. "We failed you once by not believing. We won't fail you again by not supporting. Go learn, go grow, go become whoever you're meant to be next." The 6 months transformed everything I understood about cooking. In Paris, I learned precision in classical technique. Copenhagen taught me to see potential in ingredients I'd previously ignored. Tokyo brought discipline that bordered on meditation. Bangkok exploded with complexity that made me rethink flavor entirely. Barcelona finished with fire and tradition, teaching me that rules existed to be mastered before being broken. Throughout it all, I video called Jordan weekly, watching the restaurant thrive under his leadership. My family stayed connected too, my father blogging about the journey, Derek using my experiences in his consulting work, Kelly creating wine pairings inspired by each region. When I returned to Portland in late spring, everything was familiar yet different. I could see opportunities for improvement that my expanded knowledge now made obvious. The equipment was the same, the layout unchanged, but my perspective had shifted so fundamentally that the space felt new. I'm thinking we need to change everything and nothing. I told Jordan, the foundation is solid, but there's so much more we could do. We closed for a week, the first time since opening. I taught the team techniques from each city, demonstrating not just the methods, but the principles behind them. We deconstructed our menu through the lens of what I'd learned, examining each dish with fresh eyes. The result was recognizably ours, but elevated, more precise, more intentional, more confident. Food critics noted the increased sophistication. Regular guests remarked that the food felt simultaneously refined and approachable, as if we'd figured out how to be excellent without being intimidating. My family came for dinner during our second week back. They asked questions about techniques and ingredients, engaged with the food in ways they never had before. My father looked at me with awe. This is different. Better, somehow. It's more intentional, I explained. Every element serves a purpose, same philosophy, just executed at a higher level. Derek shook his head slowly. I used to think success was reaching a destination and maintaining it. But watching you constantly push to grow even after succeeding, I realize success is actually about constant evolution. Kelly raised her glass, to aspiration, to coming back changed, to having the courage to leave and the wisdom to return better. The opportunities that followed were unexpected. A cookbook deal blending Pacific Northwest ingredients with international techniques. A documentary series following my journey. Invitations to lecture at culinary schools, but the most meaningful was a call from Margaret Chen, asking me to join the foundation's selection committee and mentor the next resident. I was matched with Sophie Laurent from Montreal, a young chef with the same excitement and terror I'd felt. What if I'm not ready? She asked during our first conversation. The residency isn't about confirming you're already great, I told her, it's about showing you how much further you can go. The question isn't whether you're ready, but whether you're willing to be uncomfortable long enough to grow. Guiding Sophie through her journey felt like completing a circle. I'd been given an extraordinary gift, and now I could help someone else receive it. We talked after her challenging days, processed what she was learning, and I encouraged her to push past comfort zones. Watching her confidence build alongside her skills felt deeply fulfilling. Jordan and I also launched new initiatives at home. We created a program for young cooks from underrepresented backgrounds, providing scholarships and mentorship for those with talent but not resources. We partnered with local schools to teach cooking classes, sharing knowledge with the next generation. Derek's consulting firm had grown, and he asked me to speak to clients about navigating family dynamics in business. I agreed, finding unexpected fulfillment in sharing hard-won lessons about belief and betrayal, about rebuilding trust, about maintaining boundaries while staying connected. On Ember and Oak's 7th anniversary, we hosted a celebration that felt less like a milestone and more like a meditation on journey. The restaurant was exactly what I'd envisioned, and nothing like I'd imagined, simultaneously familiar and transformed. My family sat at their usual table, the one that had once sat empty, now filled with people who'd learned to truly see me. There was no need for grand gestures. Our healing was complete because we'd integrated the past into our story, rather than treating it as a wound. After service, I sat alone with wine, looking around at the space that had been my universe for 7 years. Sophie texted from Barcelona, finishing her residency. Just completed my last service. I can't believe how much I've changed. Thank you, I responded. The residency is over, but the growth isn't. Everything you learned becomes part of how you work forever. She wrote back, I'm scared. What if I can't live up to what I'm capable of now? You will, I assured her, because once you've seen what excellence looks like, you can't unknow it. The standard is set, now you just meet it. Looking around Ember and Oak, I realized that was true for all of us. We'd set standards through our experiences, and now we had the beautiful burden of meeting them daily. It wasn't always easy, wasn't always comfortable, but it was always worth it. The journey from that devastating opening night to this moment had taught me something fundamental about human potential and the nature of success. We're all capable of more than we imagine, more than others can see, more than circumstances suggest is possible. But realizing that potential requires courage to step into uncertainty, resilience to withstand doubt, and faith that the work itself will validate the risk. My family had tried to protect me from failure by preventing me from trying. Instead, they'd accidentally given me the greatest gift possible, discovering I didn't need their belief to succeed, that my strength came from within, that the only validation that truly mattered was my own. Everything else, the accolades and recognition and eventual family support, those were bonuses, meaningful but not essential. As I locked up and stepped into the Portland night, I thought about young chefs who would doubt themselves, because others doubted them first, about dreams that would be deferred or abandoned because belief felt too risky. I made a silent promise to share this lesson as widely as possible. Other people's limitations don't have to become your own. Success is possible even when you stand alone, and the courage to believe in yourself is the only prerequisite for extraordinary achievement. Ember and Oak would continue, evolving and growing, facing new challenges, and reaching new heights. My family would continue, our relationships deepening through ongoing understanding and support. The industry would continue, with new talents emerging and old standards being challenged. And I would continue, carrying the lessons of that empty opening night table, using them to fuel constant growth and fearless pursuit of excellence. Tomorrow the restaurant would open again, and I'd stand at that pass, calling out orders and checking plates, doing the work I loved with people I respected, creating experiences that mattered. The cycle would continue, as it always had, as it always would, but I would never forget the lesson of that empty table, the gift hidden in the abandonment, the strength discovered in the absence of support. Those memories weren't wounds anymore, they were wisdom, and I would carry them forward into whatever came next, ready to face new challenges with the certainty that I was enough, had always been enough, would always be enough, regardless of who stood beside me, or who chose to walk away. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out.